Imagine typing the name of your hometown into Google Maps and it simply isn't there. No streets, no buildings, no landmarks, just a blank green patch as if the place never existed. No satellite images, no street view, no history. Now imagine you know this town exists because you've been there, because people live there, because you've walked its roads. But when you try to prove it, the internet tells you it's gone. This is not a science fiction story. This is a real-world mystery. For years, rumours have circulated about a small rural town, one that appears in older maps, census data, even family photo albums, but which is now completely absent from the world's largest mapping services. Google Maps shows nothing. Bing Maps is the same. Even OpenStreetMap, the crowdsourced map of the entire globe, contains only a vague outline with no official name. Some say the town was removed after a catastrophic chemical spill, its existence quietly erased to avoid public panic. Others whisper about a secret government facility beneath it, requiring total blackout from public records. Then there are the stranger theories. Experiments in psychological manipulation, glitches in the simulation we call reality, or even entire communities that phase out, drifting in and out of our world's timeline. We're going to dig deep into archived satellite images, forgotten newspaper clippings, and first-hand testimonies from people who swear the town is real and that they've been there recently. We'll trace its coordinates from decades-old maps to see exactly when and why it disappeared from the digital world. And in the process, we might stumble into something far bigger, a pattern of vanishing locations scattered across the globe, all hidden in plain sight. So the question is, what is the real reason this town was erased from our maps? And what are we not supposed to find if we go looking for it? Before it became a mystery, it was simply another quiet dot on the map. The town, let's call it by its documented name Dunwich Hollow, was small with a population never climbing past 2,500. Nestled between two low ridges with a river cutting through its centre, it was the kind of place you drove through without noticing, unless you were from there. Old brick storefronts lined the main road, a single gas station stood at the corner of Oaken Mill, and on Sunday mornings the bells from St Bridget's could be heard clear across the valley. For decades, Dunwich Hollow was perfectly ordinary, appearing in road atlases, US Geological Survey maps, and even local tourism brochures. In 2003, when Google Earth launched in beta, there it was. Street names, rooftops, even parked cars visible from above. Early users could fly over the town, tracing its winding streets and noting the peculiar way the river looped around like a crooked horseshoe. But sometime in the late 2000s, something began to change. People who grew up there noticed subtle oddities online. First, Street View never seemed to get updated. While surrounding towns had crisp, modern imagery, Dunwich Hollow's visuals were stuck in an outdated, low-resolution snapshot. Then, one by one, the street labels began to vanish. Typing the town's name into Google Maps would zoom you into the area, but without the usual place marker. It was as if Google no longer recognized the location as a town. By 2011, the first serious red flag appeared. A local photographer, Stephen McRae, posted on an online forum, "Why is my hometown gone from Google Earth? It's just a field now. No roads, no buildings, just green pixels." Others replied, assuming it was a glitch. But when McRae uploaded side-by-side screenshots from 2006 and 2011, the difference was undeniable. In the newer image, Dunwich Hollow wasn't blurred, as sensitive sites often are. It was completely absent. No signs of demolition, no rubble, no dirt roads. The entire landscape appeared as untouched grassland. It started innocently enough, someone scrolling through Google Maps late at night, tracing familiar roads from their childhood. But when they reached the town, they remembered visiting with their grandparents. Something was wrong. The roads leading to it were still there, the surrounding forest unchanged, but the town itself was gone. No street names, no landmarks, not even the faint outline of buildings from satellite view. Just a smooth green expanse, as if it had never existed at all. At first, they thought it was a glitch. After all, Google Maps isn't perfect, data errors happen. But as they dug deeper, the absence became more unsettling. Old maps from the early 2000s clearly showed the town. So did physical atlases and archived GPS data. There were photos of a post office, a gas station, and a small elementary school. And yet, in the present day, No digital map acknowledged it had ever been there. Word spread quickly through online mystery forums. People began cross-referencing GPS coordinates, posting screenshots of strange visual artifacts, and sharing personal accounts. One user claimed they had driven to the location only to find a chain-link fence topped with razor wire blocking the road. Another posted that their grandfather used to work in the area, but refused to speak about it, always changing the subject with a nervous laugh. Theories began to spiral. Some believed it was a case of cartographic censorship, a practice where certain locations are deliberately obscured on public maps for security reasons. Military bases and missile silos are known to have such protections, but why would an ordinary small town be treated the same way? Others suspected a darker history, illegal dumping, secret experiments, or even an incident that forced the evacuation of the entire population. One particularly haunting detail emerged. Every archived Street View photo of the area, even from years past, had been replaced with newer images. Images that showed nothing but empty land. The metadata suggested these photos were uploaded years after they were supposedly taken, as if someone had gone back to edit the past. And then came the most chilling discovery. A few users using obscure map layers and backdoor APIs managed to access satellite imagery that hadn't yet been updated. There, faintly visible through the pixelation, were structures, long warehouse-like buildings in perfect rows, with no signs of human life. The shape of the layout was too precise to be random. What had replaced the town? Why was it hidden? And perhaps most importantly, who was ensuring it stayed that way? As the mystery deepened, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about a place missing from a map. This was about something, or someone, making sure we could no longer find it at all. This wasn't just a missing label, it was a missing reality. People began testing other services. Bing Maps showed nothing but forest in the exact coordinates. Yahoo Maps still had the town labelled, but with no satellite imagery available for that section. Even OpenStreetMap, run by volunteers, showed only a vague grey polygon marked unspecified area. And yet, the town still physically existed. Travellers who followed paper maps could drive there. Locals still lived in the same houses, walked the same sidewalks, and bought groceries at the same small market. The erasure was purely digital, but it was spreading. In late 2012, McRae made the 45-minute drive from a nearby city to photograph the town again. He described something unsettling. While the people he met were friendly, they were cautious, evasive when asked about the missing maps. One shop owner reportedly said, "Best not to ask about that. Folks around here like their privacy." That phrase, like their privacy, became a recurring line in later witness accounts, as though someone or something had decided that Dunwich Hollow would no longer be part of the searchable world, and if you wanted to find it, you'd have to go there in person. By this point, curiosity had turned into something stronger, an obsession. I needed to see it for myself. The coordinates from the old maps were burned into my memory. According to the GPS, the drive should have been just under 2 hours, but from the moment I left the highway, something felt off. The road narrowed, twisting between dense walls of pine. My cell signal vanished in minutes, and the GPS began to lag. First, it claimed I was moving in circles. Then, the road simply disappeared. The screen showed my car drifting across a blank green void. I passed no other vehicles, no houses, just rusted road signs with names scratched out, their surfaces warped from years of neglect, or something else. In the back seat, I had the old paper atlas open to the 1998 page, where the missing town was clearly marked. In reality, I was less than 3 miles from it. But the closer I got, the heavier the air felt, like the atmosphere itself was thickening, and then I saw it. The fence. Chain link tall enough to stop a truck topped with razor wire. A faded no trespassing sign hung crookedly, its lettering half erased by rust. Beyond the fence, the land stretched out flat and empty. No houses, no main street, no sign that anyone had ever lived here. I killed the engine and listened. At first, there was only the sound of wind through the trees. Then, something else. A low, mechanical hum, almost too deep to hear, coming from somewhere far beyond the fence. I could feel it in my chest more than I could hear it. The dirt near the fence was disturbed, like it had been dug up and refilled recently. I crouched to take a closer look and saw a small circular metal plate embedded in the ground, the size of a dinner plate. It had no markings, just a faint heat radiating from it. I reached out, but the hum grew louder, and I felt a sudden vibration through the earth beneath my feet. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Movement, just at the edge of the tree line. A figure, too far to make out clearly, standing perfectly still, watching. I got back in the car and left, fast. But in the rearview mirror, for one split second, I could swear the fence was gone. In its place was a road leading straight into the heart of the missing town. I told myself I'd never come back, but that hum, it wouldn't leave my head. I could hear it in the silence, in the static of the radio at night. It wasn't just sound, it was like a frequency tuned to pull you in. 2 weeks later, I returned, this time at night. The air was colder now, sharper. My headlights carved through a fog that hadn't been there on the last trip. I parked a quarter mile from the fence and walked the rest of the way, my breath clouding in front of me. The hum was back, fainter but steady. The fence looked older this time, weaker. The no trespassing sign hung by a single nail, swinging in the breeze. I pulled the bolt cutters from my bag and hesitated, half expecting to see the watching figure again. Nothing. Just the whisper of wind through dead leaves. 1 cut. 2. The chain link gave way. I slipped through. The ground beyond was strange, patches of cracked asphalt poking through grass, as if a road had been buried and forgotten. My flashlight beam caught the glint of something metallic, a rusted street sign lying face down. I flipped it over. The name of the missing town was still faintly visible beneath the corrosion. I kept walking. The hum grew louder with every step, accompanied now by another sound, a faint, irregular tapping, like footsteps that weren't mine. I swung the flashlight in all directions. Empty. Then shapes began to form in the darkness, outlines of buildings faded and wrong. Their angles seemed off, like they'd been built for eyes that didn't see the way ours do. The windows were too tall, the doors too narrow. Some houses had no doors at all, just black openings yawning into the night. On the ground near one building, I found a half-buried glass jar. Inside was a photograph, warped and water-stained, showing a group of smiling people in front of what looked like the same fence I'd just cut through. Only there was no fence in the photo, just the town, alive and bustling. I was about to take the photo when I heard it. Footsteps, close this time, moving fast. The flashlight caught something moving between the buildings, a figure, pale and long-limbed, moving in short, sharp bursts, as if each motion was a separate photograph. The hum spiked, rattling my teeth. My camera screen glitched, showing 2 overlapping images, the abandoned street in front of me, and another version of it, lit by sunlight, full of people frozen mid-step, their eyes all fixed on me. I ran, and as I crossed back through the fence gap, the hum cut out instantly, like a switch had been thrown. The night was silent again, but when I got to my car, the passenger door was open. By now, the story of this missing town had grown from an internet curiosity to a full-blown conspiracy theory. People weren't just asking why the town had vanished from Google Maps, they were beginning to ask who had the power to erase it. In the early 2000s, a strange pattern emerged. Official land surveys of the area began showing blank spaces where neighbourhoods once stood. County records that once listed dozens of property owners now displayed only a single entry: restricted holdings, federal lease. Satellite imagery made the mystery even stranger. For years, the area appeared as nothing more than a blurry green patch, a pixelated smear that seemed immune to Google's usual photographic updates. Amateur cartographers started digging through archived imagery, piecing together the area's history frame by frame. They noticed something disturbing. In older shots, you could make out faint outlines of streets, foundations, and even parked cars. But in later images, post-2012, those shapes were gone, replaced by eerily uniform vegetation, as if nature had reclaimed the land in just a matter of months. Journalists tried to get answers. Local officials, when approached, claimed they had no comment or insisted that the land was under environmental rehabilitation. Yet, when Freedom of Information Act requests were filed for environmental studies, they were denied on grounds of national security. National security for a small rural township? It didn't add up. Former residents who had been silent for decades began speaking up online. Some claimed their homes were bought out under eminent domain after contamination was discovered in the water supply. Others told more sinister stories: government contractors in hazmat suits, roads closed overnight, and unexplained illnesses spreading among those who stayed too long. A few mentioned strange vibrations at night, followed by low droning noises that seemed to come from underground. These whispers reignited an old theory that beneath the town lay a forgotten military installation, possibly from the Cold War era, used for experiments the public was never meant to know about. If true, this could explain the deliberate erasure from digital maps and the reluctance of authorities to discuss it. But it didn't explain one thing: why, in the modern era with countless satellite companies and independent mapping tools, no one could get a clear image of what lay there now. Some explorers decided the only way to get answers was to go there themselves. A small group of urban explorers organized a trip, sneaking past warning signs and slipping through the tree line where the main road once led. According to one account posted briefly online before being deleted, they found perfectly flat, barren ground where the heart of the town once stood, almost like a concrete slab, but covered in a thin layer of soil. In the center, they claimed, was a hatch, sealed shut with heavy bolts and surrounded by faint markings burned into the ground. And then, in perhaps the most unsettling twist, the group claimed they were being watched. A black SUV appeared in the distance. No sirens, no shouting, just headlights slowly approaching. They didn't wait to find out who was inside. The post ended abruptly with no updates. Weeks later, their account was wiped from every platform. It was becoming clear. Whatever happened to this town, someone was making sure the truth stayed buried. What happens to a place when it's not only abandoned but erased? In most cases, abandoned towns are left as ghostly reminders of their past. Crumbling buildings, faded road signs, and the occasional scavenger picking through what remains. But in this case, it's different. The traces are not only gone on the ground, they've been wiped from the world's largest digital map. No satellite labels, no street view, no name. We're now deep into the investigation, and the picture is becoming stranger, not clearer. Multiple independent search attempts to locate the town have all ended in the same way, getting lost in a thick tangle of roads that don't match the maps, or hitting security fences without any signs explaining their purpose. Residents from neighbouring towns admit they remember the place, but they describe it with a strange hesitance, as if recalling a half-forgotten dream. One man agreed to speak under the condition of anonymity. His story is unsettling. It wasn't like a normal closure. One day people were there and the next it was like it never happened. Even the mail routes changed overnight. Folks didn't move out over time, they were taken out. Trucks, buses, all before sunrise. Local government records offer no explanation, at least none that's visible to the public. Property deeds tied to the town stop abruptly in the late 1990s, replaced by vague listings under state management. There's no indication of a buyout, no record of natural disaster, no federal project announcement. We dig deeper, looking for environmental causes, and here the first real lead appears, a set of internal environmental reports, partially leaked online, suggesting high levels of chemical contamination in the soil and water supply. But those same reports list the contamination as remediated years before the town vanished. If this is true, then what caused the sudden and total erasure? An old photo, shared by a woman who grew up there, offers another clue. In the background, past the smiling faces, you can just make out a fenced-off facility on the edge of town. She swears it wasn't there the year before. Rumours swirl about government research, chemical storage, even Cold War-era experimentation, but there's no definitive proof. And then there's the matter of the strange light. Several locals insist that in the months before the disappearance, people saw a shimmering glow over the town at night, like an aurora that didn't belong there. Some dismiss it as industrial lights, others claim it was the reason they came. The more we search, the more it feels like this place is fighting to stay hidden. Physical traces are scarce, documents are incomplete, and every official channel either denies its existence or claims the data was lost due to system migration errors. But when we stand here, in the silent woods where streets once ran, it's impossible to shake the feeling that the town is still here, just unreachable. What's more disturbing is that its removal from Google Maps may not have been an accident. It could have been deliberate, an act of digital disappearance meant to seal away whatever happened here forever. And yet, the land remembers. Beneath the soil, under the roots, perhaps even in the old foundations now buried by decades of undergrowth, the truth waits to be uncovered. We have one last lead, a set of coordinates not on any public database, whispered to us by someone claiming to be a former resident. If they're real, they could lead to the heart of the mystery, or into something we're not meant to see. The investigation into the town's disappearance from Google Maps should have been simple. An oversight, a data error, at worst a bureaucratic mistake. But the deeper online researchers dug, the stranger it became. Digital sleuths pored over every available map dataset, cross-referencing historical archives with modern satellite imagery. Nothing matched. The grid coordinates didn't align with any official record, as if the area had been deliberately shifted on the map. What made it more unsettling was the growing list of people claiming they had been there recently. Truck drivers swore they'd passed through its main street just a few years ago. A group of hikers reported stumbling across a cluster of buildings deep in the forest, street lamps still glowing faintly though no one was around. Yet when they tried to return, they couldn't find the road they had taken before. Journalists tried to contact the local government offices that once had jurisdiction over the area. Phone numbers were disconnected. Letters returned, unopened, marked "address not found." Inquiries to state records turned up nothing. No deeds, no census records, no proof the town had ever officially existed in the past 20 years. Then came a peculiar thread on an obscure urban exploration forum. A user posted grainy, low-resolution photos allegedly taken inside the town. In them, storefronts were abandoned yet eerily preserved, mannequins still in window displays, half-drunk cups of coffee on diner tables, as if everyone had left in a hurry. The timestamp on the photos was dated only 8 months prior. The thread was deleted within hours. The user's account vanished. Other members reported receiving private messages warning them to stop looking. Still, a few determined explorers organized expeditions. Using old paper maps and GPS coordinates archived from before 2008, they attempted to enter the missing zone. None of them ever posted a successful update. One group's YouTube livestream cut to black mid-broadcast after they reported seeing road signs with the town's name just ahead. That's when theories began to shift from simple mapping errors to something darker. Government experiments, toxic contamination, military involvement, or even an unexplainable phenomenon that made the area unstable, dangerous, or worse. Whatever the cause, the silence surrounding the town's absence from Google Maps had become almost as frightening as the disappearance itself. Every missing document, every scrubbed photo, every dead-end email made the mystery deeper, and it was clear someone or something wanted it that way. When investigators began compiling first-hand accounts from those who claimed to have seen the missing town, one thing became apparent. No two stories matched. One trucker swore the main street was paved with a small gas station on the left and a diner still open at midnight. But a hiker, just a month later, described the same street as dirt, the buildings sagging and boarded, no lights anywhere. Another witness claimed the town was surrounded by farmland. Someone else insisted it was in the middle of dense, almost impassable woods. Photographs only deepened the confusion. Side-by-side comparisons showed storefronts changing colours between shots, street signs that seemed to swap names, and skies that never looked quite right. Sunlight falling at impossible angles, shadows bending toward the wrong direction. Some witnesses even contradicted themselves in the same conversation. A man interviewed by a local podcaster recalled walking through the town on a crisp autumn afternoon, then minutes later said it was snowing heavily when he arrived. When asked about the inconsistency, he became visibly distressed, unable to explain why he remembered both. An online theory emerged that the town wasn't in one fixed location, or even one fixed time. The more people tried to reach it, the more it seemed to shift, like it was never meant to be found in the same form twice. Then there was the strangest detail of all, the clocks. Several witnesses mentioned seeing timepieces on church towers, in shop windows, in living rooms, stuck at different times, some frozen at 3:17, others at 8:42. Not one clock in the town ever moved, and none matched each other. Theories spiraled. Was this a shared hallucination, an elaborate hoax, or was the town caught in some kind of temporal distortion, a place that borrowed scraps from different moments in history? Whatever the truth was, every new testimony only made the timeline more fragmented, and the people who swore they'd been there seemed haunted by the memory, speaking less about what they saw and more about the feeling, the same hollow, indescribable sense that something had been waiting for them and had let them leave on purpose. For years, the shifting accounts of the town left researchers with nothing solid, until one man came back with proof. His name was Paul Henley, a former surveyor who had heard the stories while mapping back roads for a logging company. Unlike others, Paul didn't stumble into the town by accident. He went looking for it. According to him, he followed an unmarked gravel road that wasn't on his company's maps. It wound deeper into the forest until the trees parted, and there it was. Paul spent less than an hour inside, but he took photographs, over a dozen, before he says a heavy fog rolled in, obscuring everything. By the time it cleared, the town was gone, replaced by a thicket of dead pines. He assumed the road would lead him back, but when he turned around, it wasn't there anymore. When Paul shared his photos, they stunned the small online community obsessed with the legend. Each image clearly showed the same town others had described, except for one unsettling detail. In every shot, in the far distance, there was the same dark figure standing perfectly still, sometimes on a roof, sometimes behind a window, sometimes just barely visible at the edge of the frame. He also brought back physical items. A tarnished brass key engraved with a symbol no locksmith recognized, a crumpled receipt from a diner that hadn't existed in over 50 years, and a sealed glass jar filled with cloudy water he claimed he'd scooped from the town's fountain. That jar became the most disturbing piece of evidence. In the days after Paul returned, he noticed it would sometimes be clear, sometimes murky, and on rare occasions. He swore he saw shapes moving inside. Friends dismissed it as his imagination, until one night, while showing the jar to a group at his home, the lights went out. When they flickered back, the jar was warm to the touch, and the water inside was gone. In its place, fine, dark sediment coating the glass, like the bottom of a dried-up riverbed. 2 weeks later, Paul vanished. His house was found locked from the inside, the jar still on the kitchen table. The key and photographs were gone. Until then, every encounter with the town had been a solitary event. One person, one strange detour, one story that could be explained away. But in the early hours of March 14th, 1998, something changed. It started at exactly 3:12 a.m. Across 3 neighbouring towns, the power failed without warning. Streetlights dimmed, televisions went silent, and even battery-powered clocks froze, their second hands twitching but refusing to move. And then, people saw it. From their porches, bedroom windows, and darkened streets, residents noticed a distant glow coming from the direction of the old forest. Some described it as a warm, golden light, like the sun trapped beneath the horizon. Others swore it was cold and silver, reflecting off a low bank of mist. But the strangest part was that those who claimed to see more than light, those who claimed they saw the town, each saw something different. To Mary Ellison, it was bustling, alive, with townsfolk walking the streets in clothes from the 1950s. To John Rooker, it was a burned-out ruin, every building gutted and blackened. To 11-year-old Christopher Kane, it was neither. He described a place made entirely of glass, with no people at all, only shadows moving inside. And yet, there was one detail every account shared. In the very centre stood a tall clock tower. Its face was clearly visible from miles away, its hands locked at 3:12. When the power returned, the glow vanished instantly. In the days that followed, researchers from a nearby university interviewed dozens of witnesses, but their testimonies couldn't be reconciled. Some thought they had all been dreaming. Others insisted they had never been more awake. One thing was certain: whatever happened that night, it had scale. The town was no longer a whispered myth. It had been seen by dozens of people at the same moment, and just like that, it vanished again. In the weeks after the 3:12 event, a group of 5 amateur explorers decided to settle the question once and for all: where was the town? They weren't scientists or journalists. They were friends, 3 men, 2 women, who had been trading stories about the phantom town on a local bulletin board since 1996. After comparing witness reports from March 14th, they noticed something chilling. All descriptions placed the glow at the same rough bearing from 3 different vantage points. If their calculations were correct, all 3 lines intersected deep inside the old forest, in an area not marked on any public map. On March 28th, they met at dawn, each carrying backpacks stuffed with supplies, analog cameras, compasses, and a bulky VHS camcorder. They joked on the way in, laughing about how this was their ghost town camping trip. But the deeper they went, the more unsettled they became. At first, the forest seemed ordinary, but by midday the terrain stopped matching their maps. Compass readings drifted by as much as 40 degrees. Birds fell silent, and the underbrush was strangely sparse, as though something had burned through here decades ago. Then they found it. At 2:47 p.m, they emerged into a clearing and stopped dead in their tracks. It wasn't a building or a road, it was a line. A perfect semicircle 30 feet across, where the ground on one side was lush with grass and the other was bare, cracked earth. The air on the barren side shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. One of them tossed a stone across the line. It vanished. Not fell, not rolled, vanished. The camcorder footage captures the moment clearly. The rock simply ceases to exist the instant it crosses over. Shaken, they tested the line again with a long branch. The wood passed through effortlessly, but the moment they pulled it back, the portion that had crossed was gone, cleanly severed, as though sliced by something impossibly sharp. They didn't cross, not that day. When they returned a week later with more equipment, the clearing was gone. The forest floor was unbroken, and their compasses worked normally again. Whatever that barrier had been, it had moved. In 2003, 7 years after the barrier was first reported, one man claimed he could get inside. His name was Alan Dresden, an amateur radio technician with a fascination for anomalies. Friends described him as obsessive but methodical. He had been following the Phantom Town legend since the 90s, compiling witness interviews, triangulating sightings, even tracking compass interference patterns across multiple seasons. By his calculations, the barrier was not random. It moved in a predictable, looping circuit, returning to the same spot roughly every 1,872 days. March 8th, 2003 was one of those days. Alan left a sealed letter with his friend marked "Open if I'm not back by sunrise." In it, he wrote, "If I'm right, I'll step into a place no one has seen in decades. If I'm wrong, this will all sound like madness." At 3:09 p.m, his camcorder records the moment he steps into a clearing almost identical to the one from 1996. The faint shimmer is visible. He takes a deep breath, mutters, "Here we go," and steps forward. The tape distorts for 3 full seconds. When the image stabilizes, Alan is standing on a wide, cracked street lined with leaning utility poles. The sky is an unnatural pale grey, the air heavy with a low electrical hum. In the distance, houses sag, as though softened by years underwater. His voice trembles. This isn't abandoned, it's frozen. He pans across parked cars with shattered windows, clothes hanging on lines, toys scattered on lawns, all coated in a fine layer of something like frost but black. A sudden metallic clang echoes from somewhere up the street. Alan freezes, whispering, "Someone's here." The footage becomes erratic. Quick pans, the sound of rapid footsteps, short bursts of static. The final clear shot is of a figure standing at the far end of the street, motionless, facing him. too far to see detail. The camcorder drops to the ground, still recording, showing only Alan's boots as he backs away, muttering "no, no, no," before the image collapses into full static. Alan did return, barely. He was found the next morning at the forest's edge, clothes damp, eyes bloodshot. He spoke little, but when asked what he saw, he answered only once, "It's not a place, it's a trap." Alan Dresden's camcorder provided an eerie clue. His trip, judging by the footage, lasted just over 40 minutes, but his friends swore he was gone for nearly 15 hours. Other alleged survivors told similar stories. One man claimed he'd been wandering the streets for half an afternoon before giving up and finding his way out, only to discover 3 days had passed in the outside world. Another swore the opposite, that he'd spent weeks inside, scavenging and sleeping in abandoned homes, yet emerged to find that less than 2 hours had passed. It wasn't just subjective perception. Every mechanical timepiece brought into the zone, watches, clocks, even metronomes, would fail in unpredictable ways. Quartz watches would drain instantly, springs would jam or snap. Even digital displays would flicker with nonsense symbols, as if the numbers themselves refused to stabilize. Researchers who reviewed the data began to suspect that the phantom town was not fixed in our timeline. Instead, it seemed to drift, slipping in and out of sync with our reality. This could explain why it was so rarely found, and why so many who entered never came back, because in some cases, a minute here might be a year there. And if the reverse was true, if years could pass for you while only minutes passed outside, it meant something even more unsettling. Some of the missing might still be inside, and still alive. That idea would be horrifying enough, if not for what came next. In scene 14, we uncover a chilling piece of evidence, a series of photographs from inside the town, developed years before the camera was even made. In 2011, a small-town historian named Margaret Fisk was sorting through a box of donations left at her county's heritage centre when she found something odd, an envelope with no sender, no return address, and a single word scrawled in shaky handwriting, "Home." Inside were 12 photographs. They were printed on fibre-based paper, consistent with 1940s development techniques, complete with yellowed edges and chemical wear. But the images were anything but ordinary. They showed the phantom town, same cracked streets, same 3-windowed grocery store witnesses described decades later. But here, the buildings were pristine, signs painted, windows gleaming, sidewalks swept clean, and the streets were bustling with people in period clothing. Experts examined the photos. The film stock was authentic for the era. But the problem was this: the camera model used to take them wouldn't be invented until 1972, 3 decades later. One photo in particular drew the most attention. In the far corner, reflected in a shop window, was a partial figure holding the camera. The face was obscured by glare, but the clothing, the posture, even the wristwatch were unmistakable. It matched almost perfectly a missing persons photo of Alan Dresden, taken in 1998. If Dresden's camera somehow captured a town as it appeared in the 1940s, then he didn't just find the phantom town, he may have stepped into its past. The final photograph in the set was different. It wasn't just the people, the cars, or the street that drew attention, it was the skyline. In the distance stood a red brick building topped with an ornate clock tower. Local historians knew it well. It was the Harrington Municipal Hall, a mid-century civic project completed in 1966, over 20 years after the supposed era of the photographs. This detail made the timeline impossible to reconcile. If the photos truly came from the 1940s, the building should not have been there. Yet its presence was undeniable, and the design matched the blueprints exactly. Some argued that the town in the photos was not our world at all, but an alternate one, where construction happened sooner or events unfolded differently. Others believed the photos might show multiple eras bleeding into each other, as if time in this place wasn't fixed, but folding and collapsing like warped film stock. There was one more problem. The Harrington Municipal Hall clock, visible in the image, displayed a very specific time, 2:17 p.m., Records from the real-world building's history show that on September the 3rd, 1983, lightning struck the tower at precisely 2:17 p.m., freezing the mechanism forever. To this day, the clock remains broken, its hands locked in place. If the photograph truly captured that moment, it wasn't taken in the past at all. When the envelope's photographs reached the National Optical Imaging Lab, the goal was simple: date the prints using chemical analysis. But what the technicians found had nothing to do with paper fibers or ink composition. It was buried inside the images themselves. At first, they noticed faint distortions, areas where the grain pattern seemed wrong. Not like aging, but like interference on an old analog broadcast. When enhanced digitally, these distortions began to move. Yes, move. Through microscopic image mapping, they extracted what looked like 3 frames of film, overlaid within the still photograph. The frames, when played sequentially, formed a jittering loop, showing a man in a long coat turning his head toward the camera, and then smiling. The unsettling part? The man was not visible in the original print at normal scale. He only appeared in this extracted, hidden layer. Further analysis revealed more anomalies. Distant windows where curtains swayed, even though the photo was supposedly frozen in time. A parked car with its brake lights flickering, clouds shifting subtly between frames. One technician, against protocol, pushed the playback speed faster. The effect was like watching a silent film buried inside a photograph. But then, something happened that froze the entire room. In the final fraction of a second, the man in the coat stepped forward, his face filling the frame, and his lips formed a single, unmistakable word: a name. The same name that had been scribbled on the envelope when it first arrived. The name uncovered from the photograph was Nathaniel Harrow, a name with no current entries in any modern registry. But in the county archives, buried in a faded ledger from 1843, the name appeared alongside a brief, grim note: died suddenly, cause unknown. The record described Harrow as a land surveyor in a remote northern town, a man known for his precise mapping of places that, at the time, were considered uninhabited wilderness. No photographs of him were supposed to exist. The first commercial camera wouldn't reach that region for another decade, and yet, in a sealed box in the local museum's basement, we found something chilling: a single daguerreotype, unlabeled except for a penciled scrawl on the back: Harrow. The resemblance to the man in the hidden frames of the modern photograph was undeniable. Same high brow, same long coat, same unsettling half-smile. Old newspaper clippings painted Harrow as an eccentric, obsessed with mapping invisible boundaries he claimed only he could see. Days before his death, witnesses reported seeing him wandering the woods with what they described as a glass box on a tripod, an object no one could identify at the time. Even more disturbing, his grave, when located, was intact, but the coffin was empty. The burial records made no mention of this, as if the absence had simply been ignored. The trail to Nathaniel Harrow's final days led deep into the Black Hollow forest, a place that, then and now, locals avoid after sunset. Harrow's original maps, preserved in the county archive, showed winding paths and topographical lines, but also strange annotations, symbols that didn't match any known cartographic code. We overlaid Harrow's maps with modern satellite images. To our surprise, some of his markings aligned perfectly with natural features, the curves of rivers, the edges of ravines, but others corresponded to nothing. Flat land, empty clearings, or so it seemed. Following his trail in person, the forest became strangely silent. No birdsong, no wind, just the distant creak of trees, and then we found it. A clearing precisely where Harrow had marked one of his unknown symbols. On the ground, half buried under moss, was a rusted metal frame, about the size of a small doorway. At first glance, it looked like part of a fence or an abandoned structure, but inside the frame, the air shimmered ever so slightly, as though the light itself was bending. Our photographer took a picture. When we checked the camera's preview screen, the clearing was empty. No frame, no shimmer. But when we uploaded the file to a computer, the frame was there, along with the faint figure of Harrow, standing just beyond it. We returned to the clearing with modern instruments. If Harrow's glass box was some kind of viewing device, we wanted to know exactly what he had been looking at. The LiDAR scan returned something strange. The forest floor inside the frame's boundaries appeared distorted. Not lower, not higher, just subtly displaced, as though the scan had slipped out of sync with physical reality. The temperature inside the rectangle was consistently 5 degrees colder than the surrounding air, yet no wind passed through it. Harrow's journal entries from that same location were unsettling. The frame is not a window, but a place where the air thins. I saw the river where no river runs, and the black tower beyond it. The sound was like the Earth's own breath. We set up overnight surveillance. Around 2:47 a.m, our motion-activated camera recorded a brief flash of light within the frame. No lightning, no fire, just a perfect, silent burst. For less than 2 seconds, the frame was filled with movement. Something passing through. The footage was incomplete. The camera froze in those 2 seconds, resuming only after the light faded. Whatever crossed that threshold, if that's what it was, left no trace in the clearing. Harrow did not stop at the Black Hollow clearing. His notes, though fragmented, show a pattern. He was following something. From the forest, he boarded a freight train heading west, making stops in towns so small they no longer exist on modern maps. In one entry, he describes meeting a farmer who saw a second frame in his cornfield before the storm took it. The man refused to go near it again after his dog vanished without a sound. In another, Harrow notes an abandoned grain silo with a frame built into the side, large enough for a man to walk through. It was as if Harrow believed the clearing in Black Hollow was only one doorway in a series, scattered across the country. His sketches show each frame pointing toward a fixed direction, always northwest, like aligned markers leading to something beyond the horizon. We traced his last confirmed location to a whistle stop in the Dakota Plains. There he sent a single telegram to a colleague. "I think I'm close. If I don't return, don't look for me. Look for them." After that night, Harrow vanished from all public record. No hotel logs, no ticket stubs, no eyewitness accounts. It was as though he stepped off the map entirely. The Dakota whistle stop where Harrow's trail ended was barely more than a siding and a station house, set against endless plains. Yet on the night of March 2nd, 1949, this quiet outpost became the epicenter of an unexplained event that locals still whisper about. Shortly after sunset, every light in town went out. Not just the station lamps, but the homes, the diner, even the battery-powered radios. The darkness was total, so deep that farmers later claimed they could not see their own hands in front of their faces. Witnesses reported a low hum preceding the blackout, a sound they described as not mechanical, not natural, more like pressure in the skull. One woman swore she saw a faint rectangular glow at the far edge of the wheat fields before it winked out, leaving only the stars. In the station's guest ledger, Harrow's name appears for the final time, signed in his unmistakable handwriting. Beneath it, he had scrawled a cryptic line, "The air is thinner here." When power returned hours later, Harrow was gone. His belongings, camera, notebooks, train ticket, remained in his rented room. Only one object was missing, the brass compass he had carried since the war. At first light on March 3rd, 1949, the local sheriff's office and a small search party fanned out into the wheat fields beyond the Dakota whistle stop. Harrow's trail, they assumed, would be straightforward, footprints leading into the darkness, perhaps ending at an abandoned farmhouse or along the railway tracks. Instead, they found an area of wheat stalks pressed flat, not in neat circles like a hoaxer's handiwork, but in jagged, almost fractured geometric shapes. The stalks weren't cut or broken, they were bent cleanly, as if softened by heat, yet there were no scorch marks. At the centre of the formation lay Harrow's leather-bound field journal, half buried in damp soil. The first few pages were blank, but deeper inside, entries appeared in a hurried scrawl, fragmented sentences about an echo without sound, light folding in on itself, and the compass needle spinning until it stopped entirely. A few feet away, deputies found metallic fragments, lightweight, pitted, and with a strange iridescent sheen. No one could say if they were part of a farming implement or something else entirely. Samples were reportedly sent to a lab in Minneapolis, but no results were ever filed. There were no footprints leading away from the site, no drag marks, no signs of struggle. It was as though Harrow had stepped into the center of that strange formation and simply ceased to exist. By the fall of that year, Charles Harrow had been missing for 6 months. Official search operations had long since wound down, replaced by occasional volunteer efforts and the stubborn persistence of his family. The story had faded from headlines, surviving only in local gossip and in a thin case file gathering dust at the county sheriff's office. Yet something about Harrow's disappearance wouldn't let go. It wasn't just the lack of evidence, it was the strange details surrounding it. The journal entries, the unusual metallic shards, the inexplicable shapes in the wheat. None of it fit together in any rational way. And that was precisely the problem. One deputy, who asked not to be named, claimed that weeks after the search ended, an unmarked envelope appeared on the sheriff's desk. Inside was a single Polaroid, a photograph of the wheat fields at night, illuminated by an otherworldly white light from above. The photo's composition was shaky, the angle odd, as though it had been taken in haste. On the back, in red ink, were 3 words: "You weren't alone." The envelope had no return address, no fingerprints, no evidence of postage. When the deputy asked what should be done with it, the sheriff reportedly told him to throw it in the damn trash. But the deputy didn't. He kept it. And years later, after leaving the force, he quietly passed it to a local historian who had been following the Harrow case. When I asked the historian if I could see the photo, he shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "You wouldn't understand without the rest of it." He wouldn't explain what the rest of it meant. Adding to the unease was an unsettling pattern noticed by a group of online sleuths. In the months following Harrow's disappearance, Google Maps quietly updated its satellite imagery of the area. But where there had once been visible tracks in the field, irregular shapes and faint patterns in the crops, the updated image showed nothing but smooth, uniform wheat. A perfect, untouched expanse, as if nothing unusual had ever been there. Google never commented on the change. Some said it was simply an update cycle, a coincidence. Others believed the imagery had been deliberately altered. Harrow's brother, Nathan, remains convinced Charles was investigating something in those fields before he vanished. He told me 2 weeks before it happened that he'd stumbled onto something big, said it would sound crazy if he tried to explain it, but he'd prove it soon, and then he was gone. In the years since, strange reports continued to surface. Lights in the distance, sudden stillness in the air, and the hum that some swear they can feel more than hear. None of it leads anywhere concrete. No new evidence, no confirmed sightings, only echoes of a night that changed everything. The official narrative remains unchanged. Harrow is presumed dead, likely lost to a tragic accident. But in the quiet spaces between the facts, another possibility lingers, one that can't be explained by sinkholes, wildlife, or human malice. And if that unmarked Polaroid is real, if someone really was there watching that night, it means Charles Harrow's disappearance wasn't a solitary event at all. It turns out, Charles Harrow's case may not be unique. As I dug deeper into the story, past the rumours, past the speculative blog posts and half-baked YouTube theories, I started noticing a troubling pattern. The Polaroid allegedly sent to the sheriff. It wasn't the only one. In 1998, in a rural stretch of Nebraska, another unmarked envelope appeared, this time on the desk of a local newspaper editor. Inside, a grainy photograph of a cornfield lit by the same strange white light as the Harrow image. On the back were the words, "It's happening again." That case involved a farmer named Douglas Keene who vanished while checking his irrigation lines late one night. His truck was found idling at the edge of the property, driver's side door wide open, coffee still hot in the cup holder. Keene was never found. I found at least 7 other cases like this, stretching back decades. Always rural, always agricultural land, always a sudden disappearance with little or no physical evidence. And in 4 of them, satellite images from before and after the incident showed clear signs of alteration. Sometimes the land looked slightly shifted. Sometimes it was blurred beyond recognition. Sometimes, like in Harrow's case, it was replaced entirely with a perfect, computer-smooth overlay. Of course, there's no official acknowledgement. Law enforcement treats each incident as unrelated. The missing are written off as victims of natural accidents, bad weather, or foul play that simply left no leads. But then there's the photos, physical prints, not digital files, always from an elevated perspective, as if taken from above the field, always with that same stark, unnatural lighting. When I asked an image forensics expert about them, they said the shadows in the photos suggested the light source was not the moon and not a helicopter spotlight. It's too even, they told me. It's like daylight, but without a sun. One private investigator I contacted, who worked on a case in Kansas in the early 2000s, warned me outright. If you're chasing this, stop. These aren't just missing persons cases. You're looking at a series of events someone, or something, doesn't want documented. Even stranger. Each disappearance occurred within a very specific seasonal window, late summer to early fall, when the crops were near full maturity. This meant the fields were tall enough to hide nearly anything from ground level, but visible from the air. And yet, the biggest anomaly may not be in the photographs or the maps, it's in the survivors. In two separate incidents, individuals who had been working in the fields at the same time as the missing person later reported a sudden paralyzing stillness before blacking out, waking up hours later with no memory of what happened. They were disoriented, dehydrated, and in both cases found miles from where they had last been seen. Neither has spoken publicly about their experience since. If these cases are connected, and the evidence suggests they are, then Charles Harrow's disappearance wasn't an isolated tragedy. It was part of a quiet, deliberate sequence stretching across states and decades. The question isn't just what happened to him, but why these places, why these people, and why the meticulous effort to erase their stories from the record. And the deeper I went, the more I realized. Someone has been paying very close attention to anyone asking those questions. To this day, no trace of Charles Harrow has ever been recovered. No footprints, no body, no discarded belongings, only the stubborn void where his story should have ended. The wheat fields where he vanished have long since been harvested, replanted, and cycled through seasons. To most, they're just farmland now, indistinguishable from 1,000 other stretches of Midwestern soil. But to those who've lived here long enough, the land carries a memory. They still speak in low voices of nights when the wind dies without warning, when the air grows heavy and charged as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to return. The journal Harrow kept in the months before his disappearance remains locked away in a county archive, its leather cover cracked, its pages brittle. The phrases scrawled inside are sparse but unsettling, cryptic notes about shapes in the dark, and a hum you can feel in your teeth. The last entry, dated just days before he vanished, is a single line. It's closer now. No one has ever provided a satisfactory explanation for what he meant. The metallic shards once logged as evidence, thin, curved, and etched with patterns no metallurgist could identify, have since disappeared from the official records. Whether misplaced, stolen, or deliberately removed, they've become as elusive as the man himself. And the geometric impressions that marked the wheat that summer, the perfect spirals, the sharp edges and the stalks, the mathematical precision, have never appeared again. Whatever force created them, whether mechanical, natural, or otherwise, has not returned. Perhaps it was a one-time anomaly. Perhaps it was a warning. Was Charles Harrow the victim of foul play? Did he stumble into a hidden sinkhole or abandoned shaft, swallowed by the earth before anyone could hear his cries? Or did he cross paths with something that cannot be neatly filed under natural causes? Something so far beyond our understanding that it left no trace except whispers in the wheat. The locals will tell you the strange stillness that comes over the fields in late summer isn't just weather. Some say they've seen faint lights skimming the horizon. Others swear they've heard the same low hum Harrow described, a sound that seems to bypass the ears and settle directly into the bones. There are no final answers here, only loose threads, sealed files, and fading testimony. Some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, but perhaps that's exactly what keeps them alive. Every unresolved case is an open door for speculation, investigation, and discovery. The truth, if it exists, may be buried deep, but the deeper it's buried, the more determined we should be to dig, and the longer we wait, the more the trail fades. We've followed the breadcrumbs, grainy photos, missing records, conflicting accounts, yet we end here, staring at a blank space where an entire community should be. On paper, the town's absence is nothing more than a data correction by mapping services, a bureaucratic adjustment, a digital ghosting. But in the testimonies we've heard, in the satellite images quietly altered without public explanation, in the whispered warnings from people who clearly knew more than they were willing to share, there's a different story forming. One where the disappearance wasn't an accident but a decision. Maybe the town's removal was about protecting sensitive government projects hidden in plain sight. Or maybe it was an effort to erase something much older, an incident the public was never meant to remember. Some say it was contaminated land from a Cold War mishap. Others speak of an unreported environmental collapse that would have bankrupted the responsible parties if it ever came to light. And then there are the stories you only hear when the recorder is off, the sightings of strange lights, the low-frequency hum, the odd sickness that seemed to spread before the evacuation. What's certain is this: places don't just vanish from the public record without someone, somewhere making it happen. And when those decisions leave no trace, no closure, and no accountability, the truth doesn't disappear. It just goes deeper underground. Standing here today, the grass has reclaimed the streets. Foundations lie buried beneath layers of soil and time. The only evidence left is in the memories of those who once lived here, and in the stubborn refusal of certain officials to discuss why the maps were changed. Perhaps the most unsettling question isn't what happened to the town, but whether similar disappearances have already happened elsewhere, unnoticed. How many other coordinates have been quietly scrubbed away while we weren't looking? How many communities have been swallowed not by disaster, but by deliberate erasure? If this was an isolated case, maybe we could accept it as an anomaly. But the patterns are there, hidden in plain sight. Small anomalies on the edge of digital maps, place names that vanish between updates, census records that no longer match the geography. And each time, the same silence follows. That's where you come in. The deeper we look, the more we rely on people like you, researchers, locals, amateur historians, to bring forward the scraps of evidence others might overlook. Old photographs, family records, unaltered maps, even rumours, because sometimes a single overlooked detail can unravel an entire cover story. If you've seen something, anything that ties into this story, or if you know of another place that's been wiped from Google Maps without explanation, share it, post it, preserve it. Because history doesn't just vanish, it's erased when we stop paying attention, and the moment we forget these places ever existed, that's when they're truly gone. Visuals fade to black. Then, a brief flash of the blurred map location, clear for just a split second before it glitches and vanishes again. If this story made you wonder what else could be hidden in the forgotten corners of history, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more strange vanishings, unexplained events, and the secrets time has tried to bury. Share your theories in the comments, because somewhere out there the truth might still be waiting.